Hello, graphic novel literature students. Welcome to the video for quarter 4, week 3, day 2. This video is also the same video I'm going to direct you towards for weeks 4, 5, and 6 as well, because you're going to be working on an extended project for the next few weeks. As a reminder, everything you say, do, or type is recorded, so please remember to keep it school appropriate. And as always, there's no saving, downloading, or taking pictures of our class ever. The agenda for today is please select a core text to read for the next common task, which is a task about tracing the hero's journey in a graphic novel. You have done that already in a single issue of a comic, right? The Red Hood comic and the Black Widow comic. So now you'll be applying that same idea to a larger text, right? A graphic novel. You're going to read selected texts in 40-page intervals, completing each of the 3 parts of the tracing an archetypal hero and the hero's journey notes assignment, which I'll go over with you shortly. And then I'm going to give you a suggested reading schedule to work within. All right, first, to get you set up, you'll need the Tracing the Hero's Journey note sheet assignment. Right, it looks like this in one tab or window. And then you'll also want to open up the text selection to be able to go back and forth between those 2 things as well. All right, so let's first talk about your options, right? You can choose to read either Pinocchio Vampire Slayer or Plutona for this assignment. Regardless of which one that you pick, you're still doing the same work. You're looking for the hero's journey, you're looking for archetypal characters, etc. So let's take a look at each of these texts in turn very briefly. Pinocchio Vampire Slayer reimagines the little wooden boy of fairy tales as a monster slayer who roams the street at night avenging the death of Geppetto, his father, by using his long wooden nose to stake vampires. This is an example of the hero's tale with some really dark twists. It's got like all black, white, and gray visuals, but it's also very stark, very kind of haunting in some ways. And then the other option is Plutona. Plutona follows the story of 5 suburban kids who discover the body of Plutona, the world's greatest superhero, in the woods. This is a dark and heartbreaking journey about friendship and coming of age, all through the lens of the superhero genre, right? Like some of the stuff, the coming of age tale, but, not about the superhero or the heroine herself, but about these kids as they discover her body in the woods. Both of these are incredibly interesting, and I'm sure you'll be happy with whichever one you go with. So let's talk about your note sheet. If you look at the directions, it says, read your selected text, stopping every 20 pages or so and reflect on the question or prompts below. You'll eventually use these notes to help you write an essay, so be sure to record something every 20 pages or so, because your essay will require that you discuss the beginning, middle, and the end of your selected text. So part 1 of the assignment is looking for evidence of the archetypal hero. If you need a refresher on that, you can reread the information on the 11 superhero archetypes that we discussed earlier at the beginning of the quarter, or you can revisit your notes from earlier as necessary. You'll notice on the left-hand side, there's this question that says, what is one piece of information about archetypes from the website that you see reflected in the first 40 pages of your selected text, and how? Then underneath, there's another question. But just to be clear, this is the exact same question. I'm just asking it a different way for those people who like to have questions rephrased. So alternatively, what archetype does your selected text protagonist fall under in the first 40 pages of your text, and how can you tell? Right? Your protagonist of the story is your main character of the story. I will point out that for Pinocchio Vampire Slayer, Pinocchio is your protagonist, so you'd be paying attention to him. But for Plutona, you actually have 5 protagonists, right? And each section of the graphic novel kind of follows each one of them, like one at a time. So you would be kind of writing your notes about each individual kid that comes up in that 40-page chunk. If you need to, you can revisit the examination of heroes and villains resource that we looked at before about like the 8 archetypes for heroes and heroines. Heroes and heroines, but then also like how those get flipped for villains as well. So when you're filling out these charts, and when you look further, right, the other part 2 and then part 3 down here are just in 40-page chunks, right? So this is for pages 41 to 80, and this is from page 81 to the end of your text. And they're all asking the exact same question. So let's talk about ways to kind of make sure that we complete that. So remember to stop every 20 pages or so and jot down your notes. That way you're not reading 40 pages and then having to remember everything that you read. If you stop halfway and take notes, it'll make things much easier for you. Once you've reached your page goal, for example, once you reach page 80 here and once you reach the end of the text here, you would want to add more notes on the pages that you just read. And then lastly, you want to try and turn your notes into complete ideas or sentences. That'll make recycling them for your essay much easier later. Each of your charts should have 4 bullet points or 4 sentences. So for example, in this one where I'm supposed to read from page 41 to 80, right, the first 20-page chunk from page 41 to 60, my notes, I say, I see an example of the Hades the recluse archetype in Dan's character. And then my second bullet point is the example, or answering that question, how, right? Well, the scene where blah, blah, blah happens, right? And I'll just kind of describe it. It's also a good idea to write down specific page numbers so that you can get back to these things when you're writing your essay and when you're trying to jot down quotes. And then for the second half of this, right, from page 61 to 80, I have another note. Zyklon is definitely an example of the Osiris the Punisher villain archetype. And then my last bullet point, my fourth bullet point here, my example of that. When he says, I will destroy the world for doing this, that, and the other thing to the environment, etc. This is clearly my example of him fitting into this archetype. So you would want to make sure that you have 4 bullet points like what I have in each of these sections, right? And then all you do is just kind of change out the page number chunks and then insert people's names and then insert the quotes as your evidence or description of the scene as your evidence. Part 2 of the assignment is about recognizing the signs of the hero's journey, right? Part 1 was all about how can you tell what archetype your hero is falling under, but then part 2 is about the whole story itself, right? Where are these 4 main kind of plot points of the hero's journey, right? Experiencing the known world, journeying into the unknown world, undergoing the death and rebirth cycle, and beginning the return journey. So you're answering the question, how does the protagonist of your selected text and the story structure sync with those things? A quick note about this, right? You may want to revisit this chart at every stopping point in your reading, or you can just wait until the very end and then ask yourself, what did I see in the beginning of the story? And talk about that. What did I see towards the end? And talk about that. I preferably would do it as you go because you might not see some of those things until the very end. But sometimes it's easier to ask yourself that question right after you've read it. And just like above, right, you can use quotes where necessary, but the majority of your response should be in your own words. And just remember that each of these 4 bullet points, right, these are just the general categories, right? Undergoing the death and rebirth cycle is the general plot point category, but then there's the specific ways that shows up in the hero's journey, right? Approaching the innermost cave is one way, facing the great ordeal is another, and receiving the reward is another one that falls under that same kind of category. And you can always go back and revisit the podcast, which has all that information, which I hyperlinked for you, just in case you forget. Okay, so the major thing that I wanted to go over is the suggested reading schedule. You have 3 weeks, a little more than 3 weeks, to read this, right? So what I would suggest, if you look at this chart, right, is today you read the first 20 pages of your selected text, and then continue working on your chart. You can work on a little bit like today, maybe, and then continue working on it tomorrow. And then Sunday, read up to page 40, right? Work on the first part of your chart for pages 1 to 40. By Tuesday, you want to make sure that you've completed that top part of the chart so that on Wednesday you can read pages 41 to 60, and so on and so on and so on. I broke this down so that you're reading in basically each day you're reading about 20 pages, and then the day after that you're working on the chart. So like 20 pages of reading, work on the chart and take some notes. 20 pages of reading, take some notes. You obviously don't have to follow this exactly. You could do both on the same day, right? You could read the first 20 pages and work on your chart the same day instead of breaking it up into 2 separate days. But I just wanted to show you, if you broke it up into the smallest chunks possible, this would be how I would advise you to do it. You'll notice when you get to the third week down here, right, from Monday to Wednesday, you should be working on part 2 of the assignment, The Hero's Journey. And then Thursday and Friday, like Friday with the 28th is when it is due, May 28th. So you would want to make sure that you complete part 2 of the assignment, right, and get all of that done by the deadline. If you have questions, please make sure you ask the sub, or you can go back to different parts of this video and rewatch those. I'm also available via email. If you wanted to ask or send me an email, just make sure you use the .net one, please. And I will have the sub kind of leave this up on the screen while you're working, or you could ask the sub to go to any of the previous slides that I've mentioned in this video if you need any assistance there. Okay. So your action items for today, again, is to read that first 20 pages of your text and start working on your chart. First you have to select which one you're going to go with, read the text, and just get started. I'm sure a lot of you will find the stories very engaging and you'll end up reading more than 20 pages, but it's just an idea, right? A framework for structuring your time both inside and outside of class to get things done. And again, academic check-ins are on Wednesday from 12:55 to 1:15, and student support is in the mornings from 7:45 to 8:45. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy your graphic novel.